Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. It's the show on the internet where me and John talk about pro wrestling and whether or not it makes sense. And, gosh dang it, a lot of the time it doesn't, which makes it a whole lot of fun doing these shows, let me tell you. So, today we decided to do a little rundown of 2021 in
Woo-woo.
wrestling. We
Oh
were,
yeah,
yeah,
not the
not,
whole year.
no, because good God, it's going to be a lot of nothing happened. We couldn't go anywhere. And then everybody got sick. That's 2021. Oh, and then Boris Johnson had a party. He had more than one party.
He had multiple parties,
He's,
including in his back garden.
yeah, like an idiot, like a fucking idiot. People can see in your back garden.
And then he tries to claim it's a meeting with cheese and wine
The
and
wine and cheese meeting, yeah.
and his little baby along for the meeting as well, I guess.
Well, the baby's going to be like the foreign secretary in about 2 months,
Ah, fair enough.
given the way we're fucking knocking through them. I mean, Liz Truss isn't going to do a very good job with that shit, is she?
God no.
Good God, no, So instead of talking about the incredibly depressing real life, we're going to talk about the less depressing, but still incredibly depressing world of professional wrestling. Hooray. So we were blessed. And I'm going to use that word. I'm going to stick with the word blessed. To have watched wrestling through the what we're going to have to call the pandemic era.
Mm-hmm.
So last year was, I would say, pretty fucking woeful.
Yeah, I mean, not having crowds around for a long time has definitely taken its toll on the product, I'd say.
Yeah, not having the crowds there felt like it kind of sucked a lot of the energy out of it.
Yeah.
But also, unfortunately, gave everybody the bright idea to have cinematic matches,
Mm-hmm.
which made me want to poke my eyes out. And so last year was not fun,
Yeah, it sucked,
in
to
my
put it bluntly.
opinion. Yeah, I didn't like Stadium Stampede matches. I didn't like Money in the Bank matches where they're actually climbing up the building or whatever the fuck. I didn't like Swamp Fight matches where people drown. Oh, I didn't like any of that stuff. Me being a cynic,
Mm-hmm.
me being the bitter man that I am. So this year, eventually, crowds started to come back. And maybe naively, but optimistically, we thought, well, this is good. Now that the crowds are back, the quality of the wrestling is going to get better, isn't it? Isn't it? And yeah. And so what we've really been left with is kind of a mixed bag.
Mm.
There has been some good stuff, although to be fair to 2020, there was some good stuff in there as well.
Yeah. It
I
wasn't a
thought,
total shit show.
no, I thought the Bailey Sasha Banks stuff was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly good. A great storyline for the women with two incredibly talented women who could carry that storyline off. They did a lot of heavy lifting, those two.
Yes.
Especially given that Becky Lynch was away for a while. The latter half of the year. Those two girls did a great job of making me give a shit about the WWF or WWE. I mean, it hasn't been the WWF in fucking 20 years.
Yeah.
Asuka as well was a lovely highlight for me
Mm-hmm.
last year. And of course, she's on hiatus now. So that's not a good mark for 2021, but we'll get there. Drew McIntyre was wonderful last year.
Mm-hmm.
He did a really, really good job as champion. And, I like to highlight those things in like defense of wrestling being shitty, because it was incredibly shitty, but there was some good stuff in there.
Yeah.
I'd like to point to those things as some of the good stuff. So this year, the crowds came back kind of like the middle of the year, kind of the summer.
Yeah, July for both WWE and AEW.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't count WrestleMania in April, I think it was, where they had big crowds for that as well.
AEW were running kind of like they had people in their shows.
Yeah,
For a
that's true.
while.
Actually, yeah, they had sort of reduced capacity.
Yeah.
I think it was like 10% or something of daily space. So, and then they were kind of gradually building it back up again.
So not like a full arena, but they tried to have a little bit of an atmosphere.
Yeah, and it definitely worked and made a difference. Like it gave the shows more energy than just having the jobber wrestlers on the front row.
Yeah, I didn't like that. That I didn't like I liked the idea of them trying to put some more atmosphere into the show, but I didn't like the idea of the crowd being the other wrestlers on the show.
Mm.
Especially whenever like some of the wrestlers in the crowd were like the good ones.
Yeah.
You're like, why aren't they on the show? What the fuck? That's a plot hole. You don't want to go exposing yourself like that. But they tried to bring a little bit of energy to their shows, and like fair play to them, But it means that for the first half of the year, WrestleMania aside, we didn't really get a whole lot of atmosphere, and we were still threatened by the possibility of cinematic matches.
Yeah.
Shall I say? And so we got kind of like a strange blend, I think, of like pseudo cinematic matches.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like they started twisting themselves on their own formula that they invented, which was strange. So the cinematic matches of last year were well shot and well edited, and they looked like films.
Yeah.
Which takes away somewhat from the idea of pro wrestling. A lot of the time they look great, but also if it's like a film, then you're just essentially watching stuntmen.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
That took away from a lot of the fun of pro wrestling. Especially if it's not an arena, if it's in a football stadium or a graveyard or whatever, you're like.
Well, and generally speaking, like films are written a lot better than wrestling as well. So that didn't, help matters.
Yeah. So, and also with these cinematic matches, because of the film nature of them, and the editing of them, there was a lot more shenanigans. It felt like. For example, the fucking swamp fight between Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman, both of which no longer work for that company.
Less than a year later, they were both gone.
Funny how that works out, isn't it?
Yeesh.
And not because of that shit show. The people who came up with and put that fucking match together on TV, they're probably still employed by that company. How does that work? But the people who damaged their own fucking reputations by being in the fucking match, out you go. So we got like a twist on that kind of idea where we started to get matches that were in the ring like a wrestling match, but were clearly edited or clearly had some kind of production to them, which I didn't like. For example, the Alexa Bliss versus Shayna Baszler match. If you remember this.
I do not remember this at all.
Excellent. This is, of course, in Alexa Bliss's spooky bullshit period. Which I'm going to mark down as bad. I'm going to put that in the bad column for 2021. There's a big area for spooky bullshit. It's just going to be, it's a giant marker pen in the column for bad, which was spooky bullshit. And there was a match between Alexa Bliss in her spooky bullshit phase, which she was fighting legitimate badass Shayna Baszler, who, God bless her, deserves so much more. She had to be tag teamed up with Nia Jax for like a year, and now she's fighting spooky puppet Alexa Bliss. So they had this match, which was in the ring, but Alexa Bliss kept, trying to hypnotize Baszler and like tried to drop some lights on her and stuff like this.
Oh yeah, now you say it, I remember that.
Yeah, you remember this. So like she, making it look like an accident and whatever, but like lights would fall from the ceiling. I almost hit Shayna Baszler and stuff like this. So like this was it was in a ring. It was a wrestling match, but you could tell that things were happening.
Mm-hmm.
That shouldn't really be happening. And I'd like to put another mark in the bad column. Not sure if you would class this as spooky bullshit, but bullshit nonetheless. And it's going to be the infamous zombie lumberjack match from WrestleMania Backlash between Damian Priest and somebody. Where a lot of zombies don't. Nope.
Yeah.
We're going on. We're going to ignore that. So it was a lot of zombies that were. Nobody said these are actors dressed as zombies.
No, it was all done as a tie-in to that Zack Snyder movie, Army of the Dead, starring Batista.
That motherfucker. So everybody just assumed that they played it for real. They were like, wow, these are real zombies that are eating John Morrison. These are real zombies. And so it was a wrestling match, but it had a distinct air of, bullshit to it. I think that the first one, which I think happened at the end of last year, was between Randy Orton and The Fiend.
Yeah, where he set The Fiend on fire. Yeah.
Yes. And that was that was a wrestling match. It was in the ring, but a lot of stuff happened in that match where, it was clearly edited.
Yeah, you couldn't have done it in front of a live crowd.
No. And I didn't like it. It was more of a match than the cinematic matches, so that's nice. But it was still like bullshit. It's not close to what wrestling is.
No.
Or is supposed to be. And we all know that wrestling has changed significantly from what it used to be. But even then, it was still somewhat wrestling.
And
a lot of the stuff we've seen hasn't been. Through the whole pandemic era, it just hasn't been wrestling. People have figured out that if there's no audience to watch them live, then they can just fucking do whatever they want. And WWE are piping in their own chants and editing the shows strangely and having these spooky bullshit characters, which wasn't fun to watch because it ruins the spontaneity of it, and it also eliminates all pro wrestling aspects of it. Right? If it's all spooky bullshit, then why are they fighting with their fists?
Yeah, exactly. It's it takes it a bit further away from the whole grounded aspect of wrestling being an actual sport or whatever.
If Randy Orton can set a guy on fire and get away with it,
yeah,
why would he hit him with a power slam?
Yeah,
why? So this year has we've seen less cinematic matches.
Yeah, thankfully.
So that's been good. But like I said, we've seen more of those edited cinematic matches or kind of pseudo cinematic matches, as I said earlier. So I didn't like them. So that's not a good point. Let's try to go bad point, good point.
Okay.
That was a bad point. You would agree with this bad point, I imagine.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm surprised you didn't bring up the whole box thing from WrestleMania with Alexa Bliss and her inky face and
oh God, the
all that
box
bullshit.
Structure.
Yeah. Jeez. I mean, what the hell was that?
But that's it. That's another Fiend Alexa Bliss thing.
Yeah. It's
Are we gonna have to put that entire gimmick on in the bad column?
I think so, because I mean, it didn't really work when there wasn't an audience, and it certainly didn't work when there was an audience. So, it's got to be counted as a bit of a failure, I guess.
It was awful.
And it was weird as well, because it was Bray Wyatt's whole gimmick to begin with, and they kind of gave it to Alexa Bliss and fired Bray Wyatt.
They fired him.
Just,
nonsense.
Yeah.
Why the fuck did that happen?
I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense, which is appropriate for this show. So, that was bad.
Yeah.
It was very bad. Not a good way to start the year off. Not a whole lot of fun. So let's do a good thing then.
Okay, well, sticking with WWE, let's say the sort of rise of Bianca Belaire. because she came in, she won the Royal Rumble this year, and then she moved on to headline night one of WrestleMania against Sasha Banks in what was one of my favorite matches of the entire year, where I thought they absolutely delivered on that huge stage. And then Bianca Belair sort of, she really lived up to her potential as champion and, continued to do some good work. So I think obviously she has been sort of pulled back and cooled off a little bit over the last few months ever since losing the title to Becky Lynch at SummerSlam. But I think it's only a matter of time before she gets moved back into the title picture again. And so, yeah, it's like one of the very rare instances where WWE has seemingly got it right in a way, like making a new star. So hats off to them for that.
Right. That's unusual in that it feels like they did something good.
Yeah, it seems pretty rare these days.
Right. Given the fact that we've seen, I don't know how many people come up from NXT to the main roster and do fuck all, or just be ruined, just be driven into the ground, just have nothing happen to them.
Yeah.
I mean, the list is so long. The list is bigger than the ones who came from NXT to the main roster and were a success.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And then I think the reason for that is because they spend all that time in NXT kind of figuring out what they want to do and who they are and how to play their gimmick and all this kind of stuff. And then when they're finally ready to get called up to the main roster, for whatever reason, they decide, well, no, we want to tweak this and change that. And we'll, dress you up as like the fourth member of Demolition or something. And then all of a sudden it just, it's not the same character that worked before. And it's not going to get over in those circumstances.
Right. They do seem to just change the whole lot, the whole gimmick.
For no reason.
No, for no reason. It's incredibly strange. Like you said, they spend all that time getting over in NXT. And you could argue, the NXT audience is smaller than the WWE audience. Fair enough, but the NXT audience still exists. People still will have seen those characters on NXT and then want to see them on so then when they do debut on WWE, on Raw or SmackDown, as a barber or whatever the fuck, the people are going to be like, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, why is this happen? What the fuck? And then that's why people don't buy them, because they're totally different. And then the company's going to be like, I wonder why they're not getting over. And they're going to fire them because they're just not working right. You're like, well, you had shit that worked and you ignored it, and that's why you're in trouble. Like, I don't know why they don't get that either. It's so strange. It's really, really strange. Bianca Blair is one of the few people who they didn't touch at all.
Yeah, she's pretty much the exact same character she was in NXT.
And she's getting over. What does that tell you? That they're absolutely correct to do that, to leave them alone and just let them fucking do their NXT stuff on WWE television, and they'll probably get over because people like them in NXT. They're probably gonna like them on the main roster, right? It's a no-brainer. It's a slam dunk, and yet time and time again, they miss the mark and they fuck it up, right? So Bianca Belair, like a real outlier, especially this year or whenever she got called up. For just being one of the success stories.
Yeah, can't argue with that.
So Bianca Belair has been wonderful to watch. She's really good. She's adapted really well. She's strong as an ox. She's got charisma. She's fun to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
She's really fun to watch, and she gets it. She can work a match with people. She can go. It's really cool to see her succeed.
Yeah, she's got all the tools as well. She's, like you say, she's charismatic, but she's also really strong and athletic as well, and she can pretty much do it all. So it's a kind of slam dunk of a wrestler that they should be pushing, really, because that's the kind of person who can succeed if given the right opportunity. But it's just giving them that opportunity in the first place.
Exactly. So is this gonna be one of the? Are we going back to bad now?
Yeah, I reckon so.
All right, NXT.
Yeah.
God damn it! People being brought up from NXT to just be squandered, to be ruined for no reason. Let's make him a gladiator. Let's make him a bearcat. To be fair, I didn't mind the bearcat thing.
I mean, I didn't really get it.
But nobody saw it.
Yeah.
Nobody they didn't have a chance to get it over. And then they fired him. Talking
Yeah.
about Keith Lee, of course. Keith Lee.
What
My
a wasted
goodness.
talent. Yeah.
That's gotta be I don't get that company at all. That's a slam dunk if ever I seen one. Keith Lee, good God, man. That guy. How could you not figure out something to do with Keith Lee?
Well, this is the same company that couldn't figure out what to do with like Aleister Black and Andrade and a huge long list of guys who've been brought up and have basically been squandered. So maybe it's not that shocking.
But it's still unbelievable though. It's
Yeah,
still like,
I mean,
good God, man.
yeah, it's you kind of wonder what the mindset was in signing him in the first place if they just weren't going to use him or use him to his strengths at least. And you get someone in that situation, and it's got to be so disheartening for the likes of Keith Lee and Karrion Kross and all these people who kind of probably thought WWE was going to be like their pinnacle, their the mark of their success almost, because they've made it to the big time, and then they get there and they're not even given a fair crack of the whip. So it's got to be like, well, shit, man, like that was my dream and they've basically just crushed it. So hopefully now that they've been let go from WWE and have a bit more freedom to go elsewhere and do other things, that gives them like a bit of a chip on their shoulder to go out and prove that WWE were wrong to not use them in the first place and show what they can do. So fingers crossed there will be some good to come from the bad of that situation.
I mean, Andrade hasn't really been setting the world on fire though.
Well, I mean, no, this is true. I still don't really understand how he's better off in AEW than he was in WWE, because at least in WWE he was on TV most weeks, whereas with AEW he kind of has the odd match on Dynamite and the Dark and Elevation and whatnot, but like he hasn't really been doing much at all since he debuted way back in whenever it was, like, was it March, April, something like that?
Yeah, they just aren't really using him to do stuff. Like Aleister Black, for example. He came in and he was working an angle with Cody, but he still seems to be active and doing stuff on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas Andrade is just kind of there. He kind of came in as a big deal, but they didn't follow up on that at all, which is apropos for AEW, if you ask me. Here's a guy. Oh, here's another guy. Like they just forget about people, which is a shame because I think Andrade did a great job in NXT. And,
yeah.
Deserved way more than he got. But like you said, it felt like at least he was on TV on WWE. Like you never see him do anything on AEW. Nothing really substantial.
No, I mean, he had that match with Cody a couple of weeks back where for some reason it was a no DQ match, even though they hadn't really been feuding and there was like no build to it. And then Cody decided to basically have a flaming table play into the finish, which again made no sense whatsoever. And, there was no build to it. And the way it worked out as well was like, it was pretty much Cody who took the big bump through the table, even though he was the one dishing out the move on Andrade. So like the whole thing was just a disaster. And you kind of think he left WWE for this? I mean,
yeah,
why?
It was a disaster, but flaming table, hardcore match for no reason. So everybody's going to love it. You know, that's one of the things that really grinds me about. It feels like this happens a lot. You know what? I guess we're not going to be able to go good thing, bad thing too much because there are a lot of bad things. But like, I see that a lot with the rest of fans where like they seem to be totally happy to just get these random dumbass matches on AEW. You know, but like you said, they never have a purpose. There's never a reason for this shit. They always start off with these fucking matches.
Yeah.
I remember people freaking out and loving Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker in that fucking hardcore match, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time they fought.
Yeah, I mean
What the fuck?
they'd kind of had run-ins before that though, with Britt like avoiding Thunder Rosa and or attacking her backstage and like, you know, wiping off her face paint and stuff like that. So it wasn't like it was just out of nowhere.
Although most of the other matches in AEW are like that. But
Yeah.
even you can admit that like that's still not the way you build a match. If the first match, even if they're antagonizing each other backstage, if the first match these two people have is a crazy ass fucking hardcore match, what the fuck is the second match gonna be?
Well, this
And
is the same
AEW's
problem they
answer
had.
is no match at all. That's how they answer that problem. They just don't have a second match.
But they've done the exact same thing multiple times though. Like they did the whole blood and guts thing between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle as like the very first match in that feud. Well, you would have thought, hang on, surely, you know, War Games, that's a pretty big deal. They should basically been saving that for the end. But
Right. That's
no,
the payoff.
yeah, and they just burned through it right away.
They did that first. And then that was the Pinnacle versus Inner Circle feud, right?
Hmm.
Which was part of the MJF Jericho feud,
Yeah.
which went on for fucking ever.
Mm-hmm.
That thing never ended. And then when it did end, what a surprise. Incredibly unsatisfying. Jericho wins after MJF beat him like 4 times.
Yep.
What? Including that stupid fucking blood and guts cage match, right?
Yeah.
Then after that, aside from MJF and Jericho, how much feuding did the other guys really do? Now I know there were a couple of like one-off matches between some of the other members.
Hmm.
But what happened between those two groups?
I mean, they had
Nothing.
the Stadium Stampede too, as well, where at
Oh
least
Christ.
Sammy Guevara got the win and got to go over instead of Jericho or MJF. So at least, you know, it was an attempt, I guess, to kind of settle things between the rest of the two groups. But yeah, a bit of a leap.
Right, but like, wait, so I don't know. But that's why I feel like I'm going mad trying to look for logic in AEW shit, right?
Mm.
Which, you know, we've long said that there's no point looking for logic in the WWE because it doesn't make any sense. But AEW makes no sense either.
No, I know. They're both basically cut from the same cloth, but
Yeah, they're both incredibly similar, but yet people freak out about how great AEW is, and rightly so, chastise the WWE. Whenever I'm like, why don't you chastise them both?
mm-hmm.
You know, and like AEW, for me, the bloom has certainly fallen off the rose because I did enjoy that show for a while, and then I started to see, I just started to notice just like, you know, some of the stuff doesn't make any sense, and stuff's just happening for the sake of it happening, which I don't like because there's no continuity, which is the same in the WWE. There's no point in shit just happening because that ruins the illusion.
Mm-hmm.
It totally ruins the illusion of like two guys having a feud if they just fucking have a hardcore match to begin with. That's so stupid. Like that whole Cody Andrade thing is exactly it because like how often before that were they like actually fighting?
They'd had like one crossover, I think, where it was
Right.
a tag team match with Pac and
Aleister Black.
Malachi Black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's because Cody and Aleister Black or Malachi Black were feuding.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Andrade in that one match?
Well, I mean, he
Why?
kind of was feuding with Pac, but then
Right, but
that
then he
was
does this match for Cody, and now that doesn't get mentioned anymore.
no, I know
That's over. But
who knows.
what's Pac doing?
Oh God, yeah.
He's with the
Well,
Lucha
exactly.
Brothers. He's not going after Andrade.
Nope.
What the fuck? This is like the last 2 months.
Yeah,
We're
nothing
not.
makes
This
sense.
isn't like a year-long thing like that Jericho MJF thing. This is like really recently where they're just like, whatever, fucking who cares? You're like, well, how am I supposed to follow this? You
Mm-hmm.
know? So like AEW. Well, let's obviously talk about something good AEW has done, which is signing CM Punk, which was great,
Mm-hmm.
and signing Brian Danielson, which was
Yep.
also great because, to his credit, Brian seems like he's able to show off what he can do a little more in AEW than he was able to do in the WWF. WWE, I'm sorry. Old school. But yes, he seems like he's able to show that stuff off more.
Yeah.
Which is good because, he legitimately is probably the best wrestler in the world.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, he's incredible. And so for him to be able to go out there and like do some work, that's the way to do it. But I'm gonna point to something real quick, and you'll understand where I'm going with this, I think. But we had been critical of the CM Punk turning up and not doing anything.
Mm.
He's having these matches with like fucking nobodies, and then there was no follow up on that. Most of that was the booker's fault.
Yeah.
He booked him into that match and then didn't follow up with him. That's his fault for making them look like idiots, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Bryan Danielson recently did a 1 hour time limit draw with Hangman Adam Page.
Yep.
Right? So he was able to take that guy who, he's been in AEW for a while, but he's never had a match like that. And for this to be like his first title defense was a big deal for him to go up against a guy the caliber of Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson and to go for like an hour draw. Like an hour. That's hard to do. Not a whole lot of people these days can actually go for an hour. And for Danielson to get him, Hangman Page, to be able to go an hour in a believable fashion is incredible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So still because of that match, he's now made Hangman Page look really good. Page is the champion, and he didn't beat Bryan Danielson, but he was able to hang in there for an hour, and Danielson didn't beat him either. So Hangman Page is going to look great from that. That's a great move. That's how you have a match with a big name and put him over, right?
Yeah, but I still think like it would have been more effective if they hadn't done the draw with Kenny Omega, like only a couple of months before, because
Right, exactly.
because that was like a draw which didn't need to happen. It basically, there was no follow up to it. There was no storyline to come from it really.
Right.
So it was just like, well, why did you do it then? Like you could have just had Bryan Danielson lose by some shady means, because that's pretty much how Kenny Omega won all of his world title matches up to that point. So I don't know. Sometimes they do stuff which just doesn't make sense to me.
That's just what we're saying. The booker doesn't follow that stuff up. They just have random one-off matches because they know it'll pop the audience for like one night.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do. They just go, and that's again the difference is that the Danielson Hangman Page match is part of their storyline. They've been telling a story, and this was like, I don't know if this is a culmination of it. It probably is, because they're idiots. But like that, this feels like a story.
Yeah.
This feels like an actual storyline, and I've been critical of AEW for not being able to do storylines. This feels like an actual storyline, and to our point earlier, the Kenny Omega Danielson match didn't feel like a storyline because it wasn't. It was just one match, and it just was like, what was the point of it?
Yeah.
It happened purely because I assume both of them wanted to wrestle each other.
Yeah, and I think Omega was always planning to take some time off to sort of heal up after building up all the wear and tear over the last few years, which is 100% fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just like, well, okay, but that might be enjoyable for them and enjoyable for the audience, but is it what's best for business?
Right.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. It's the same with that CM Punk stuff. Maybe Punk is the one going out and saying, I want to work with these young guys. And fair enough if he is. But working with these young guys doesn't mean let's have one match and then I'll see you later. Because it doesn't make those guys look good. But now that he's in a match or a program with MJF, for example, you can see them taking shots at each other. And so you know that if they go out and have a fucking barn burner of a match, that's going to make MJF look great.
Yeah.
Right? Because Punk's a valuable name. The problem with that is MJF is one of the few guys they've actually been able to book semi-decently. The Jericho feud aside. So, like, if they were going to use Punk to, like, highlight some of these other guys, shouldn't they actually have had Punk in a storyline with some of those other younger, newer talents instead of just having them lose randomly on episodes of Rampage or whatever the fuck they show that nobody watches anymore? You know, it's just strange. It's very, very strange, you know? Also, one thing I wanted to point out real quick was that we were talking about, a couple episodes ago, we were talking about that Punk MJF promo and how they were talking about, they were making shots at The Miz and John Cena and Triple H. We were like, this is fun, but I really hope that doesn't become a thing where they just start referencing old WWE wrestlers. Right? Because it worked. We were like, it would suck if that's what it becomes because it works in this, but you don't want to overplay your hand like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We said this, what, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, and we were like, it's a good thing they didn't do that. No. Are they doing it on purpose? Didn't they reference Ryback like last week?
Yeah, something about
man.
CM Punk being I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically being a wrestler on an undefeated streak, but not being very good in the ring or something like that.
Yeah, but like, how is it any different from like the Miz jab?
Yeah,
that's the same joke.
Pretty much.
But it's just with a different wrestler. Like, come on, man.
Well, at least it's better than MJF like randomly alluding to CM Punk wanting to bang Britt Baker or whatever that was.
What is that all about?
Ah, God knows. It made no sense either. So.
But they kept doing it.
Yeah.
And that's another problem with those guys. They're all really good, but they don't know when to stop. MJF's really good on the mic, but like you can tell that he's recycling a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is not good, you know. But at least Punk usually sounds pretty fucking original, you know. But then, you know, they got a guy like Eddie Kingston on that show, which we were like, boy, I hope now that he's had these matches with Punk and stuff, they're gonna do something with Eddie Kingston. Where's Kingston?
What? He's feuding with 2.0.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like they're trying to sort of pair him up with the Inner Circle at the moment. Like he's
why?
Who knows, man? I just again makes zero sense because they're just like throwing new information at you. Like, oh yeah, you know, Eddie Kingston's like really good friends with Santana and Ortiz and stuff like that. It's like, really? But yeah, maybe he is in real life, but in terms of the show, he's like never interacted with them really. So it just comes from out of nowhere.
He was fighting CM Punk like a month ago.
I will say though that I would think Eddie Kingston has been like low key the MVP of AEW this year because like everything they've given him, he's made the most of.
Right.
And he's delivered some really kick-ass matches as well. Like the Punk match was really good. A match he had against Miro for the TV title at All Out, I think it was. That was a banger as well. Like they beat the shit out of each other. And he had a really good match with Bryan Danielson too, as you'd imagine. But like he's been constantly delivering the goods, and like we talked about like a couple of weeks back, he's not really got the rewards from doing that. He keeps taking the losses and has to kind of build himself back up. And because he's so talented on the mic as well as in the ring, he can kind of keep doing that. But yeah, it feels like he's someone who kind of definitely deserves to be getting more than he's being given at the moment.
Right, especially given the way that they fucking treated him at the beginning of this year. Do you remember what happened then?
Oh, you mean the old exploding death rat? What was it? Barbed wire death match? Yeah.
But yeah, whatever the fuck. Eddie Kingston, they did him dirty the most out of that. And which is funny because he wasn't even in that match.
Yeah.
But AEW had this silly barbed wire exploding death match between Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley that apparently was half decent, except for the end, because Jon Moxley was down. The ring was going to. This is what I don't get. The ring was going to explode anyway. Why? Why was the timer there? Why could nobody stop the timer? Why is this a cartoon? So Eddie Kingston sees that his friend is going to be exploded because Tony Khan doesn't give a shit about his employees, according to the storyline. And so Kingston comes down and shields Jon Moxley by putting his own body over the top of, like a grenade, you know? He takes the bullet for Moxley. And I don't know, like, some smoke comes out of the turnbuckles. That is it. The ring doesn't explode. Nothing happens.
Yeah, it was a bit underwhelming, let's say.
A bit underwhelming.
Yeah.
It was awful. And Kingston was the one that looked like an idiot. He came out there and protected Moxley from that. Like, he wanted to save his friend from that. Like, they made him look like such an idiot. And the way they explained it wasn't very good either. But at least Moxley and Kingston are good enough on the mic to be able to talk their way out of that problem. And you're like, it's what you were saying. Kingston can talk his way out of pretty much everything. All the shit they've been giving him, he's been a real highlight of that company. There's a good one. We got another good one. Eddie Kingston's been wonderful. And they have just done nothing with him, despite him constantly being really good. It's unbelievable that we only got one Punk Kingston match, given the way that those two guys talk to each other on the mic with their 1.5 week build up to their match.
Yeah.
Those pricks give us this fucking Hangman, Adam Page, Kenny Omega bullshit storyline that they pretended was long-term booking and long-term storyline and all of this awful, awful nonsense. And they couldn't give us more than a week and a half of Eddie Kingston and CM Punk.
Apparently not.
This is ridiculous. And then that's it. One and done. Kingston talked a big game about how he didn't think Punk respected him. And then Punk beat him. And Kingston just looks like a chump again. He doesn't get any kind of retribution. He doesn't get to show Punk that he's changed and that he's scrappy and he's a fighter. No, he doesn't get. They just forget about it because they do the one and done thing, one match and move on. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but you know, at least he's gonna get to beat 2.0 now, and that'll, you know.
What if he doesn't? What if they beat him? Which is probably what's gonna happen.
Geez, yeah. Now you mention it, yeah.
Because, like you said, Eddie Kingston's taking the losses, and he's taking them really well. But after how many losses are we gonna keep cheering that guy? And he's still over.
Yeah.
People love him. Do something with him. Unbelievable, man. I don't know. For me, I didn't think AEW was a huge highlight of 2021. I didn't, apart from Punk and Daniel Bryan and Eddie Kingston, like, I didn't really see a whole lot of good stuff.
No.
AEW.
I think you kind of touched on the whole Hangman Omega storyline and how that has just been so blown out of the water. Like the whole thing was just a really terrible attempt to do long-term storytelling where they basically forgot about it for months and months and you know, pretended like that's part of the story and stuff, while Kenny Omega's guffing about with you know, like random title defenses against Orange Cassidy and Pac, which again had like 2 weeks to build or whatever.
Nowhere.
And it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I just don't really see how they managed to pull it off in the end, really. Because, well, I mean, they didn't in my eyes and in your eyes as well, I imagine. But in terms of most of the AEW's fan base, yeah, they've been lapping it up. Like when Hangman Page came back for when was it, in October or something, to win that casino ladder match and earn the title shot again, which came from out of nowhere, and like
Right.
people were kind of like all over it and fully supporting him. And while it's good to see, it's like, man, that's so taking your audience for granted, because
Yes.
basically they gave him shit, and because the audience is so into like everything AEW does, they just lapped it up, like
Right.
not caring them over the fact that it was, really poorly handled and stuff. So
Right.
at a certain point, that kind of, like you mentioned before, the rose kind of loses its bloom and stuff. And I think at some point more and more fans are gonna kind of start seeing this, and that's when AEW could be in a bit of trouble.
But I think part of that has to do with like the Eddie Kingston thing as well, is that those two guys are super over. And
Mm.
they're still over despite the shit that they've been given.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So while I do agree that I feel like a lot of AEW stuff is just AEW fans just enjoying everything for some, like taking it all in and ignoring the fact that a lot of it doesn't make any sense and a lot of it is bullshit. But like they all really like Hangman Adam Page, and despite all of the shit he's been going through, they still want to see him succeed.
Mm.
And it's like it's a very strange way of booking that guy, because like you said, they did not do anything with him.
Yeah.
They had him with the Dark Order, and then they just would just not have him on the show or whatever, and then they would pretend that that's like long-term booking, which of course it is not. They just still wanted to see Hangman Adam Page, and I tell you, somebody tweeted something which kind of like proves our point, but they were trying to prove their point. And it was like, wow, after he won the title, they were like, well, look at the story arc, that Hangman Adam Page has gone through, after losing the tag titles, after losing his tag partner, after losing a match against Kenny Omega, after losing all of this stuff, he finally manages to be the world champion. And you're like, he lost every match he was in, except that Casino Battle Royal thing, or whatever it was, a ladder match, right?
Yeah.
So how is that a way to build up this guy? You know what I mean? Like they have done everything they can to not make him look like a threat to Kenny Omega. They didn't make him look like a threat to Kenny Omega at all. The only reason those two guys fought is because they had a little bit of history. But he wasn't a threat. He wasn't positioned as a threat ever. He was just there because he used to tag with Kenny Omega.
And there was like no magical moment where he kind of finally stood up for himself, or had like his moment where he started believing in his abilities, or that he could beat Kenny Omega or anything like that. There was nothing in the build where, he kind of hit that rock bottom and then bounced back. It was just like all of a sudden,
just happened.
he just comes back from paternity leave and wins this ladder match from out of nowhere, and that's it. It's just like, well, what happened?
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm better now. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What the fuck? No, I wasn't. Like the two big storylines of this year, I should say, felt like it was MJF Jericho and Adam Page and Kenny Omega.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which arguably sucked. And yet people were into it, and I think they were into it because, like I said, I think they're into Adam Page. They really like that guy, and were able to because they just wanted to see him.
Yeah.
And eventually, like I said, now because he's a champion and they're actually going to be able to do stuff with him, they're going to still be on board with that, But that Jericho MJF stuff.
Oh boy.
The song and dance number.
Yeah.
Song and dance number was so strange, because people would talk to me about how they don't like the WWE's goofy bullshit. And then be like, wasn't that song and dance number great? You're like, number one, Jericho looked really sick. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
He looked really sick, which makes sense because he doesn't seem to like vaccinations. So, maybe he got sick from malaria or something. or maybe some other kind of airborne disease. I don't know. I think that's a big thing. People are the AEW fans are very, very quick to like just accept the bullshit that AEW put out and decry the shit that the WWE put out. I'm like, well, it's the same shit. Like we've been talking about zombie lumberjack matches and stuff, right? And spooky bullshit and all this other stuff. And like AEW aren't quite well, like they were last year. They had fucking Matt Hardy doing all that fucking drone shit.
Oh yeah, of course.
And he drowned people, or they were drowning him, and he would just turn up in a new costume.
Yeah.
But that's perfectly fine. Like what? Where's the line? I don't understand. It's the two companies are the same. Like they'll do something good, but immediately after that they'll ruin it with just some bullshit.
Yeah,
right?
but I mean,
both companies.
I'm almost jealous of the AEW fans for just being able to switch off and enjoy it no matter what. Like I wish I could do that, but after 30 odd years of watching wrestling, no, that's not happening. Not anymore.
Too much, man.
It's kind of like with NXT as well. Like this year we saw the black and gold get revamped into 2.0.
Yes.
And basically follow a lot of the same sort of patterns as Dynamite, really. Like it's real car crash TV where nothing really has a chance to breathe. There's just like all these unfamiliar characters all over the place, and it's very gimmicky as well. Like everyone seems to have a gimmick at the moment, but it's just like, you know, so far removed from what NXT was. It's just really hard to kind of get any enjoyment from it anymore. Like I'm sure, you know, if I gave it more of a chance, maybe I would get into it and, you know, start developing my favorites and all this kind of stuff. But it was just like, well, why are they fixing something that wasn't broken in the first place?
Right.
I mean, I know NXT wasn't setting the world alight in terms of ratings and stuff, but it was easily the best show that WWE put out every week and had the best wrestling like on a regular basis. And to see it go from that to, you know, what it is now,
whatever the fuck it is now,
it's just such a bummer, man.
Yes, I agree. We thoroughly enjoyed NXT because it just seemed like the most interesting, tight, fun wrestling show that was going on. And then the WWE were like, oh, we have a good thing. We got to ruin this. We got to ruin this immediately. And, you know, the thing about the new NXT is that it is car crash TV. It's not the same as it was. But it's also not, like, super terrible. But the problem is, it's so just not what we were enjoying. And it's turned a lot of people off. It's turned us off.
Yeah.
Just because it's not what it was. Because what it was some of the best wrestling around. And we're not talking about, like, you know, it's not the best. It's not like The Rock versus Hogan. Kind of like this. But, like, for what we had to endure is going to be the word I'm going to stick with. It seemed to be the best of the lot. And then they took that away and changed it to something that, you know, still has its merits. But, like, we're just tired. You know, we're just...
Yeah, the more I think about it, we were talking about how, you know, NXT call-ups have a history of, like, when they get brought up onto the main roster, like the things that they sort of figured out and had made work for them gets tweaked by WWE when they get on the main roster. Maybe like NXT 2.0 is their kind of attempt to stop that, because like apparently Vince and Bruce Pritchard and all that have more of a input now on NXT 2.0. So maybe the idea is that they're gonna get these young up and coming superstars exactly how they want them before they bring them up, and then they won't need to do whatever weird tweaks that Vince or whoever decides on when they do come up, and that ends up kind of you know, disappointing people or not being as successful. So maybe that's their plan. I don't know.
Do you think that is the case?
I mean, let's face it, Vince McMahon has the whims of, hyperactive child. He'll,
Yeah.
the wind will blow one direction and then it will quickly change to the other. So who knows? But we'll see. I mean, we haven't seen anyone get called up from this NXT 2.0 yet. So I guess we'll see when that happens, if they do still resemble who they were in NXT 2.0 or if they get reinvented again.
That's the trick, man. Even if they come up to the main roster with a different gimmick or with the same gimmick from NXT 2.0, we're still not going to care.
Yeah,
We
pretty
just
much.
aren't going to care, Before we wrap things up, I really quickly want to say that, like I mentioned in, I think the last episode, that really the Roman Reigns stuff, him with the bloodline, him with Paul Heyman, the stuff he's going to do with Brock Lesnar now, even though we've seen Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns a couple of times, it's still kind of interesting. So, like, I feel like the Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns, and really Roman Reigns for most of the year has been like a little highlight of the WWE. I don't think that they've been doing super good. As we've covered, I don't think they've been doing a super good job, really. But I've enjoyed the Roman Reigns stuff. I think that that's a little glimmer of what the WWE used to be able to do really well. Like, it's a really good character and a storyline, and it seems legit. And you wonder just why the rest of that show isn't like that.
Well, my only complaint with it is he's too legit. Like, he's too legit to quit. But because like he's so more what's the word? Just like real than every other wrestler on the show. Like, no one else is in his league at all. So that's kind of made him look totally unbeatable. Which is why I guess like this feud with Brock Lesnar, even though we have seen it several times over the years, is actually quite interesting this time, because obviously the dynamic shift now with Roman being the heel and Brock being the face, but then you had the Paul Heyman aspect in the middle of it where he's the special counsel to Roman Reigns, but he's the advocate of Brock Lesnar, and the will he, won't he, is he on Roman's side, is he on Brock's, all that kind of drama is helped play into it as well. So at least that's kind of interesting. But yeah, like every time Roman has gone up against, like Cesaro or John Cena, even, like those are matches where you just didn't really see him losing the title. So
well, yeah, I think that's a really good point in that they've done a really good job of building up this Roman Reigns character, but they have done zero job of building up the logical contender for Roman Reigns, other than Brock. And they didn't build Brock Lesnar because they don't have to. Brock Lesnar is Brock Lesnar. And this would have been the prime. We've talked about this 1,000 times about how this would be the prime, not necessarily with Roman Reigns, but like this is how you do it. You get a guy in a position like Roman Reigns is in right now, and then you build up another guy so that the guy who does beat Roman Reigns looks like a fucking $1 million, right? I mean, this is what we were criticizing AEW for with their Hangman Adam Page thing. They didn't build him up at all, but he beat him anyway, so it felt flat because we all knew that was going to happen, right? There was no real emotional build up to it. It's the same here. They have nobody logically who is in a position to really beat Roman Reigns other than Brock Lesnar. And I don't know if people want to see that again. I think people want, like, the fun of Roman Reigns has been that he's this newer character. Even though we've been, had Roman Reigns stuffed down our throat for a long time, this character is fun and unique and different from what we've seen before. And it's still a younger kind of, Brock Lesnar's been around for a long time. And Roman Reigns is a little bit of a breath of fresh air. And they could build somebody up, one of their newer guys or one of the people they still have on the roster they haven't cut yet, and build him up and like make a second star. How outrageous is that to make 2 wrestling stars? Whoa, crazy idea to make a heel and a face. But they don't have anybody. And it's weird that like that's on SmackDown, and on Raw they have a bunch of like main eventers, but like no good storylines to go with it. You got Lashley, you've got Big E, you've got Kevin
Seth
Owens,
Rollins,
Seth Rollins. you've got these guys, even AJ Styles if you want, or Randy Orton if they wanted to come back into the main event scene. They've got these big names, but they're not doing anything fun with them. And then on SmackDown, you've got Roman Reigns is a de facto at the head of the table, and then nobody else is even close to him.
No, I mean Drew McIntyre is probably the closest sort of contender outside of Brock Lesnar, but
And
even then,
what's Drew McIntyre doing at the next pay-per-view?
yeah, exactly. He's basically been dropped right down the card.
Ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. We're gonna put a stamp on that. Wrestling doesn't make any sense. This whole year doesn't make any sense.
Never has.
It never has made any sense. We've come to the realization now, unfortunately, that wrestling doesn't make any sense. So that's our review of 2021. Is fuck you, wrestling 2021. So I think we're gonna wrap things up really quick. We're gonna say that if you haven't figured out by the tone of our review of 2021, that we're thinking about, we're probably going to go on a little bit of a hiatus after this episode. So, thank you very much for listening to all of these shows and the ramblings we've done. And, if you enjoyed wrestling in 2021, more power to you.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing if there's people out there who are digging it and having fun.
If this is for you, then fair enough, But I think the one thing that we figured out over the last year or two is that I feel like it's not for me anymore. Whatever it is on TV that they're showing, I don't like it. It's just not for me.
Yep.
So if you guys are digging it, that's fine. That's cool. Feel free to dig it. We're gonna do something else. But we're gonna say yes. Thank you very much for listening, guys. We're gonna go on a hiatus, as they say. I don't know when we'll be back. You'll have to find out. That's it. It'll be a surprise. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Really appreciate it. And I don't know when we'll see you. We'll see you at some point.
Yep.
So goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Arr.